Hi, my name's Denise. I'm an alcoholic. Let's see. My sobriety date is December 27th, 1982, and I'm Sally's sponsor over there. From about the first few weeks, right, or something, I mean. She just had a baby, and I'm just so grateful to be here to meet their little baby, Travis and Cassie's baby. Cassie. I said my daughter's name, Sally's baby. You know, I guess I'll start with that being a sponsor it's so incredible. It's how this program really recycles itself. And, you know, if people, I've been thinking about this lately, if Bill Wilson got sober, and then, you know, he met Dr. Bob, and then they 12-stepped a few people, and then if Bill would have said, well, you know, I helped someone else get sober, I'm going to go have my life now, I'm not going to do anything else, I've given back, and then I'm going to just go live this life, you know. It just wouldn't work. I mean, I think the greatest thing about getting sober is that when you're really done with drinking, when you're at that bottom, and I'm not talking financial, social, anything like that. I'm talking about when you lose your soul, when you are done, when you are licked by alcohol. That's how I came in. I had been coming around AA for a little while, a few months, hearing people talk, going to these speakers meetings, and hearing people that sounded like me, that you know, couldn't stop drinking. And I remember just sitting like this in a pretty big meeting like this in Denver in 1982, and listening to people speak and thinking, oh, God, okay. And I'd be sort of pulled to come back to AA. And then I'd leave one of these meetings and I'd go get drunk, and I'd forget that I'd ever even gone to an AA meeting. And I remember going home and I'd get really drunk again, and I'd pass out, and I'd be crawling around on the floor, and I'd be suicidal. And I had these French windows in my apartment, and I many times thought, I'm just going to crash through those windows and land on the pavement, and it'll be over. I want this to be over. I had so had it with alcohol, and I couldn't stop drinking. And that's what AA is about, is for people who can't stop drinking. And, you know, I've been over in Delta, Colorado for 3 weeks. I have a little farm over there that my daughter and I go to in the summer, get out of Denver, just go. My parents live over there. And I've been going to meetings over there. And so far, I don't know if this is all of them. I'm sure it's not. But the message is you come in, they give you a chip, you put it in the glass of booze, and when it melts, you can drink, or just don't drink. And I'm sitting there in these meetings the last 3 weeks going crazy because, you know, it's just bullshit. There's so much bullshit in AA right now. And, you know, if I could have waited till the chip dissolved, or if I'd ever fucking had a chip, you know, welcome me with a chip, you know, that's a great way, you know. And I was like so shaking it out when I came in, and they make people stand up and like talk on their first day when they come in. It's like I hid in the back. I mean, I couldn't make it, you know, on that stuff, I guess. I mean, people do seem to get sober, but I couldn't wait for this chip to dissolve, and I couldn't like, okay, it's never going to dissolve. I'm smart. I can figure that out. Even when I'm drunk, you know, drunks are smart. We're cagey, and we're manipulative, and we're really smart. And we can figure out when somebody's lying. We can figure out when people are telling the truth. Even when we're one day sober, I had instincts. I had really good instincts of who was telling me the truth and who's full of shit. And, you know, so the chip doesn't dissolve. And, okay, so now I just don't drink. And, you know, I tried that, not with the chip, but I really tried, you know. I am not going to drink today. I'm not going to do it today. I'm gonna not drink today. Or one of my others, I'm not going to drink so much. I'm not going to get that drunk. I'm not going to get that drunk. I'm gonna have a couple of drinks. I'm going to be able to go have a couple glasses of wine, but I'm not going to get that drunk. And, that was the thought that went in this ear. And what happened is 3 in the morning, I'm pounding on my bed, which at that point was a mattress on the floor. I had my bottle of Jack Daniels next to the mattress. I had my big ashtray full of cigarette butts, and I was drinking around the clock. And I couldn't stop drinking. And my greatest resolve was not to get drunk that night, was not to drink that night. And I couldn't stop. And so, when I lost my soul was down in New Mexico in 1982. I was crawling around on a floor. I'd come to some AA meetings. There were 2 old-timers down there that 12-stepped me that night. They talked to me very calmly and gently about, drinking, and I thought, yeah, wow. And then they brought out this book, and they said, do you want to buy this book? And I thought, oh, there it goes. They're just trying to shove this book down. They're trying to sell me this book. And they, I thought, this is it. It's just another goddamn religion or something they're trying. And they didn't care. That was what shocked me. You talked about, when your thing of really seeing the truth about these traditions. And I really saw that night that these guys didn't care if I bought that book. And I was really impressed. They just said, well, have a nice night. And they got up and left. And I went back to where I was staying that night. I wasn't living there. I was staying down there because I couldn't get back to Denver because of the blizzard of 82. I was stuck down there. And I just was trying to not drink by going to New Mexico. And that was a little geographic little trip. And then I couldn't stop. And I remember that night going back there and thinking, oh, my God, I'm an alcoholic. And I'm licked. I remember using those words in my mind. I'm just licked. And I thought, well, and here's the real alcoholic. Okay, now I know that. Okay, I'm admitted I'm a real alcoholic. I'm going to go home to Denver and I'm going to drink all the rest of the booze I've got there, stored up. And then I'm going to go to AA. Okay? And I'll probably stop in Taos at the bar that I like in Taos. And then I get over Fort Garland, over that pass, headed towards La Veta, and I realized I didn't stop in Taos. I thought, well, that's weird. I always stop in Taos. And I thought, well, I'll just get home. I'll get on home, and I'll get that booze out, and I'll drink it, because no use wasting some good booze, right? Gotta drink my good booze I paid money for, and I'm going to drink it all, and then I'm going to come to AA. And I got home, and I got very, very ill. I started shaking, and I had been on a big, long binger and broken every rule I tried not to do anymore down there. And I got home, and I didn't drink anymore. And I was going to drink, and I didn't drink anymore. And I ended up at York Street. I'd never been there before in my life, in Denver. And I walked up those stairs. There were about 650 of those stairs at York Street. And I got to the top, and I went to a meeting. And it was somebody's birthday, and everybody was happy. And they had this cake, and I sat in the back, and I thought, oh, my God, I'm never going to make it. I'm never going to make it. They're happy, and they've got a cake, and they're all happy, and they all know each other, and I hated everybody. I thought, I'm not going to make it in AA because this is just way too happy for me. And but I started they talked about getting a sponsor, and I didn't know what that meant. And they talked about 90 meetings in 90 days. And I thought, well, okay. And I got this book, and I didn't want to drink anymore at that point. God kind of just shifted me into a mode. This is true miracle because I didn't believe in God. I didn't at all. And that drove me crazy. But I was even willing to believe in God. That's how bad it was. When I came in, I was willing to do that. And but I was more kind of thinking it was the group. I thought, well, it's kind of the group that I'll believe in. I'm not, and you know, but I'm not. I'm going to prove them wrong. I'm going to get through these steps, and there's not going to be a God because there just isn't any God. And so I'll just show them, you know, that. And then I saw people going through the steps at the same time I was going through, and they were drinking, and that really scared me. I thought, uh-oh, you know, the group, what's wrong here? You know, people are drinking, and the meetings aren't keeping them sober, and people, another bullshit AA is you can worship a doorknob, you know, and all that, you know, and I knew that couldn't be true because I was smart. And I thought, okay, but I'm so smart, I'm not going to really believe in this higher power thing. So it's got to be the sponsor and the whole. If I worship these steps, if I can get through these steps, you know, that'll help me. And part of that's true, you know. I mean, I think we have to work these steps in order to stay sober. And if there's anybody new, you know, that's in a desperate place tonight that is wondering about this whole deal, and you're licked by alcohol, I want to tell you, you do not ever have to pick up another drink. You don't ever, ever, ever have to live the hellish life that what it's like in the last days of drinking, maybe the last year, and for me it was the last couple of years of drinking. That I lived, and it was the worst hell of my entire life. And I had a pretty miserable childhood, let me tell you, pretty bad. One of the bad ones, and I'm not going to go into that. I had a pretty bad childhood. I've had some pretty hard things in sobriety. I went through a horrible divorce in sobriety. I had open heart surgery 2 years ago. I've got a mechanical valve that's ticking away. That was painful, and it was hard, but it wasn't as hard as the divorce and sobriety. You know, I would rather have open heart surgery again than another AA divorce. So that was bad. That was really bad. But the thing is that I have been able to stay sober through, you know, 25 plus years of lots of things, but nothing touched the hell of drinking in those last few years for me. Nothing. And that was something that I felt trapped in. I just felt like there's no way out. I didn't even really know about AA. You know, I wasn't in jail. I would get stopped by the police in Denver or outside of Denver. And in those days, I don't think there were any DUIs that I remember. Nobody was getting arrested, and nobody was being put in jail for I was drunk driving the whole time I drank alcohol. And, you know, and I'm just shocked right now that when I sponsor people that have come out of jail and it's their third DUI, and maybe they're in jail for 9 months. I mean, oh my God, I'm so claustrophobic. That would have just did me in right there. But, you know, I think, you know, I think that if you want to stop drinking, you know, the way that it happened for me was, first of all, God, you know, has to intervene in your life, and there is a God now. I'm totally with it on that for a long, long time. And I've been through a lot of stuff sober, and one of the great joys is, for me, you know, well, okay, one of the things I wanted to talk about was I go through the steps every year. I didn't just go through the steps once and then, you know, I do the 10th step, because for me, I do the 10th step. I've done 3 in the last 3 weeks with my friends in Denver. I've been with my mom and dad over in Delta. They live over there, and they're 78, 77 years old. My mom appears to be getting an Alzheimer's, and it's been stressful a little bit with the family. It always is. But I wrote an inventory last year, and we used to have to, the group I was in my early years, we wrote 2 a year, so in the first 6 years. So You can count up the numbers. I've been through the steps a lot. Written a lot of inventory, and that's not bragging. That's how screwed up, I kind of like need to write inventory every year. And last year, we were at my parents' last summer over in Delta, and I was trying to run their whole life. I mean, I'm trying to get, my sister's a paranoid schizophrenic, still lives with them. She's medicated heavily, and there's a lot of stress when I'm over there. But I was trying to run their life by getting them a will and getting them to take care of her and figuring out their financial situation. I was like, I was doing great, I'll pay for the will, I'll do all this stuff, and I got all involved and everything, and the whole thing blew up in my face, and I was furious. I was so pissed that they didn't want to do what I wanted them to do. So I wrote this inventory, and I uncovered, it's been going on for a long time. I've been pissed at them for a long time in sobriety, on and off. I've carried this kind of grudge, this anger, low level, about my childhood and all this stuff. So I wrote this inventory, and I really got to the bottom rung of the whole deal, and I made amends to my parents a little bit after Christmas time. And, I got to see when I was in that 9th step the kind of how I've tried to run life, based on myself and run the show. And the whole thing that the 3rd step talks about. I'm kind, I'm considerate, I'll pay for the will. And then if I don't get what I want, I'm mean, I'm egotistical, I'm self-serving. And I made these amends, and this summer has been the best summer of my entire life. And I realized, what happens to me in the spiritual life that I'm living is it's not a theory, we have to live it. The book talks about that. And I don't live it like all the time. That's why I have to write inventories. I get in this ego. The ego takes over, and the ego says, you can do this, and it takes me all kinds of dreadful little places in sobriety, and I have to do that ego check thing that talks about in AA Comes of Age, where the ego rebuilds itself, and it gets bigger than life in alcoholics. And Dr. Tebow talked about that in AA Comes of Age, and there's a whole book on it of his writings, where if you don't know about that, maybe you do. It's a very good book. I know it's at central offices, and it talks about how an alcoholic especially needs that ego checked or they drink again. And I got to playing around with this in my sobriety and watching people go out and drink again, and they didn't have their ego in check. They didn't, that's just one of the many reasons. But I don't want to ever drink again. I don't want to ever lose what I've been given. And the spiritual life for me is about living it. I went through huge phases of sobriety where I went and, shelves full of spiritual books, shelves, reading. And I went to monasteries, and I checked in for a week, and I did what the monks do, and, it's so holy, and, it's wonderful to sing the songs with them, and I'd get high, and then I wasn't working too much, I wasn't like paying attention to finances, and I'm not putting that down. I mean, it's wonderful stuff to be quick to see where religious people are right. I've read a lot of spiritual books, Emmett Fox. I mean, there's so many hundreds of books out there that, to read and to are inspiring and everything. I kind of stopped doing that about 5 years ago. I decided to just read the big book as an experiment because I read nothing but the big book for the first 5 years, and now I'm kind of back to just reading the big book. And once in a while, I'll see something like a book, and I'll read a couple things, and I feel kind of, it gets stuck right here, and I think, okay, no, not for me right now. I'm just going to go live the spiritual life. And that is the tough goddamn thing. That's the real thing. That's where the rubber meets the road, is when you're around your family or your husband or your wife or your kids or, I remember when my daughter, when we were married, we adopted a little girl from China. She's back there. She just turned 13, and I asked her the other day, would you like to get your own apartment? And my aunt over in Delta thought that was horrible. She goes, well, Denise, you can't be. And I said, oh, God. And she's wonderful, but she's really getting on my nerves. And then I have to stop and I have to say, like, I'm sorry, honey, yeah. And the 10th step, the 10th step is like little mini 4th step. I have to use that all the time. And, and she's wonderful. But these are the kind of amends I have to make, like when I am, I'm up to it, sort of, and I lose it, and I don't beat on myself for that. I mean, the evening review in the 11th step talks about no morbid reflection, and we're so good at morbid reflection. I'm so guilty for what I said to her today, and I'll carry it for 3 days. That's worse than just saying it and just making the quick amend and going on. I mean, it's worse to just, and I don't think God wants us to do that. The book says he doesn't, and I know, it doesn't do any good. I try to, so that was my whole deal tonight, was this whole thing, because I've been thinking about it, and I've been over in Delta. And I've been thinking when I wake up over there, I'm on this beautiful farm, the air is so nice, and it really is a nice, restful place, and I just sit and I relax. And I've been really, really thinking a lot about what the spiritual life is and how we have to live it. And I thought, well, okay, that could be kind of the main topic for when I go over and speak. And, so it's been kind of on my mind a lot. And, I think there's phases in AA. I think there's the whole... I've done service work, I just was telling Sally and Travis today, in our group we have a position where you monitor the group conscience once a month. And my job was to sit there and not vote, not have an opinion on anything. No, I call it these Irish bar fights that our group has every once in a while. It's like group conscience. And someone tonight at dinner said, yeah, and they start with a prayer, And, and we get into these big fights over all this stuff, and we pray, God, please resolve. And God works it out. He really works it out. But I was the person that had to get the fight stopped, and now it's not your turn to talk, and I sort of like monitoring kindergarten or something. No, wait a minute, you sit here and you do that. And I just stepped down from that position because my time was up. And I've been GSR. I've done a lot of stuff in my sobriety, and I've decided not to do anymore. I'm done service, and I'm not going to do it anymore. It's you guys' turn. No. And that's really the truth, is in AA Comes of Age, it talks about when you, I think Bill Wilson started figuring that out when he was about 22 years sober, and boy, I've been hanging on. I've been hanging on that I'm so important in my group, and I'm so important in AA that I've got to keep serving, and I've got to, and now that I've decided that elder statesman thing where you back off and you let the other spiritual life come in, it's been really hard. My ego's like, I just heard about our group conscience yesterday on the phone today, and it's like, oh, maybe I should have been there. Maybe I... And it's like, they didn't get anything resolved and all this stuff. And, it's not up to me anymore. It's not up to me. And there's kind of a relaxation that's come over of like, okay, now, that does not include the 12th step at all. I mean, I prayed way too hard a year and a half ago, and I got a real winner. I mean, she's the most high-maintenance sponsee I've ever had in my sobriety. And I prayed for a new person. I prayed, and I said, God, I really want a new person. And I got her. Boy, did I get her. 4.5-day 5th step, right? 127 amends. And it's been wonderful. She's like a different person, But I'll tell you, it kind of got to me to spend so much time, and now she's launched. I kind of weaned her a little bit and threw her into the group, scared her. I don't know. I didn't want to call you every day, and I said, no, you can't depend on me. You have to depend on God. And I just kind of let her go into the group. I talked to her today, and her family, she was one of the worst, like, a lot of us are. And her family lives out in California, and they have, she just went out there for 4th of July. She's been sober, 2 years in December. And her family had X'd off, nothing, now gone, And she made all of her amends. And she just went to 4th of July, and her family's pretty wealthy, and they had a big party at this house her parents live in, and they've always been embarrassed about her because, she's stolen from the guests, and, lots of stuff. And not that I ever did that, but, but I made all those amends too, right? And I stole from my mom's cash box at her antique shop all the time. But, we make those amends, and she made all these amends. And she called me from California, and she said, they want me to stay an extra day. And I was just in tears, and she said, the people at the party, all the family friends said, she's like, it's weird. She's like a whole different person, and we don't kind of know how to be around her, And, and I just was crying. I was crying because, my daughter delights me. She's doing really awesome things in middle school. There's lots of wonderful things that happen when you're sober. You can have about anything you want. But to see someone get well from this deal and to watch them recover and to watch them get a life, Sally has just blown my mind. And maybe I should tell a story about Sally when I met her. No, she said, shh. The only thing is this morning I woke up in the hotel I'm in, and I was thinking about Sally, and I was thinking about how when I was sponsoring her apartment caught fire in Denver, and she moved in with me and the girls for a few weeks, and she was working as a chef assistant or some kind of catering job or food thing, and she had these really crazy pants that chefs wear, and she had these great big brown boots that were up like over those chef pants, and she'd tromp around my house like in the morning, I'd get her coffee, and then she'd go out the door and she'd go, oh, I forgot my kids, and I got to take my kids somewhere. She was like a couple months sober, And I was like, oh my God, is she going to make it? I was praying. I was like, oh my God, these kids, are the kids like going to be okay? And what am I going to do, if she drinks in my house and all this stuff? Well, my God, she's getting her master's degree. She's like she's sort of famous, She's like been all over the world, Spain, and gotten these grants, and she's out there looking for dinosaur rocks or something. It's truly wonderful. She's got Travis and a brand new baby. I'm just overwhelmed because I've been with her for a long, long time now, and it's something you don't want to miss. It really is the best deal going, and so is this program. The only thing it really requires is like a lot. It requires you to give up your whole selfish life, and you have to stay forever, and you can't really leave. I don't know. The people sort of leave, kind of go gray and ashen. They might stay sober, but they wander around, and you see them in Walmart or somewhere, and they're kind of like, hi, and you go, you're still sober? Yeah, I'm 25 years sober, and they don't have what I want. I'm sorry, but they are ashen when they don't do this work. And they kind of go to sleep too, I've noticed. York Street is full of people that are 30 plus years sober, and they sit and they play cards every day. I personally when I saw there was a way out of drinking, and when I saw that maybe it was going to work, and then it started to work, and I started to stay sober, I got really greedy for life. I didn't want to just sit under the table and wait for the crumbs to fall. I wanted the whole banquet, and I've gotten it. I've gotten everything I've ever wanted. I wanted to adopt a foreign child from the time I was a little girl, and that I didn't even realize that till I was sober for 10 years. done that. I wanted to be married to someone in AA. Well, okay. Unfortunately, he went back out, and that's what broke up our marriage. You know, he and I, amazingly enough, through the most hellish divorce a lot of AAs had ever seen, you know, he and I are friends. I mean, in a way, and we get along. I mean, you know, but I talked to him today, and we didn't speak for a year and 9 months, and I thought, you know, he was going to have me locked up or something. He kind of was this kind of well-known guy in the Denver politics scene, all this stuff, and I thought he would, you know, have the power to. He kept saying in the divorce he was so full of drugs. He was a drug addict. I found out he wasn't an alcoholic, and let me tell you, if you think they're all the same, wrong. And now you can be both and be an AA, but you can be a drug addict, and then you find out you're an alcoholic, then you've got a path to go on, or if you're just a drug addict, you can go to NA. He was in AA hiding out, pretending that he was an alcoholic. And I lived with that man for 10 years. And I've known him now for 17 years. And he has drank a little bit of alcohol here and there, probably the equivalent of 1 bottle in 17 years. And he's done massive amounts of drugs. And there's a difference. I've lived with it. I've lived with the prescription drug addict. I know the difference. We're kind of cousins. I mean, in as far as a disease, but it's a whole different animal, and so I'm very clear on the tradition of singleness of purpose, and I'm adamant about that in our group. It's part of a lot of people's stories. You know, drugs are, especially younger people, and it's a part of mine. But I don't talk about it that much because I am a real alcoholic, a drunk. And I want to talk to people who can't stop drinking alcohol, you know. I think a lot of people, well, I'm not going to get into that. I'm going to go back to, you know, being really living a spiritual way of life. You know, making amends to people, my first set of amends, it's kind of a thing that you have to do. I mean, you have to do it in order to stay sober. I've seen the woman that I'm sponsoring that's almost 2, she got drunk at 3 years sober, and she was in a different group than I'm in. She was in a very strong step working group, one of the strongest in Denver, do the steps every year, blah, blah, blah. And she got drunk at 3, and one of the things she told me is when she kind of woke up and she was about 6 months sober and she started making her amends when we did the work together, she was moving to a different place. She found a stack of amend cards that she'd written out, and she had never made those amends. And, you know, there's places in our book that talk about, I don't want to get preachy here, but there are places in the book that talk about things that we can drink over. And one of them is, you know, we didn't do a thorough house cleaning, it says, you know. And I think amends are one. The sex area is one, and I'm not a moralistic person. But it talks about if we continue to harm others, we're sure to drink in the sexual mode. After my divorce, I had a 9-month affair with a married man. And I was, how old was I in sobriety? Oh my God, I don't even know. Maybe it was like 9 years ago. So I was a long time sober, and I just went right off the deep end, you know, with this married guy. And the reason I bring that up is because people that I confided with, the 2 women, one is my sponsor, the other one was my sponsor too, and she's dead now. But the other one is going to be 50 years sober next year, and she was my age when I came in, and I've been friends with her my whole sobriety. And she stuck with me on that deal, and she said, well, you know, stick close to me, you know, you can't get it stopped, you're just doing this deal. And you know what finally stopped it is his wife found out, and I was being very careless with my life. I was getting a divorce, I was justifying things. And I sat down that night and I thought, oh my God, I am harming her. And the book says if we continue to harm, we're sure to drink. If we've learned our lesson, and it ended that night, and the jig's up on that one for me. I mean, I'm not available for married men or boyfriends or anything. And the thing is, I realized about that experience is God alone can judge our sex conduct. That's one of the things the book talks about. But the thing I know from the group I'm in is I can't live a double life, or I will get drunk at 25 years sober. I can't live one life over here and then hide this whole other life over here, living these little secrets, over here and not sharing them with my sponsor or anybody in AA. That's a sure way to get drunk. I've seen it over and over and over. And, I'm around people that don't judge me when I screw up, and I am, my responsibility now, my first primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics get sober. That's my job from God. I signed up to be God's employee, and that's one of my jobs. The other one is to create, for me, I make decisions in the 11th step, to create a home that my daughter is safe in, a good environment, to try and raise her in the best way possible. I mean, I even go to lectures and things sometimes because in middle school it's pretty tough, to have a teenager. And one of the things is I listen now and I take advice sometimes, and it's working. It's really working, So to have my daughter, to take care of her is a responsibility. Now I'm dealing with elderly parents. And I don't have to take that on. They don't really, like I said, don't really want me to take it on. But I just sort of backed off, and I told my father a few days ago, we had a discussion about my mother, and I said, if you want to, I couldn't believe this came out of my mouth, if you need a place to live, you come live with my daughter and I. He's a wonderful man now. And he stopped drinking when I was in high school. He was a heavy drinker. He wasn't an alcoholic. But my whole childhood was riddled with a very sick Al-Anon mom and a heavy drinker dad that was drunk a lot. But then he quit. Given sufficient reason, he quit. And he can go have a beer. He can have 1 beer, 2 beers in Delta the other night. He orders a beer. He was a heavy drinker. That's the difference. The book talks about the heavy drinker, the alcoholic. And he can't understand why I can't. I go to a Delta meeting the other night, and I come back, they're watching my daughter and stuff. I come back to my house over there, and he says, how many of them were there in there tonight? Of them, like, whoa, Delta's got a few, like we're these kind of creatures, like he doesn't still think I am, but how many were you around, And that just reminded me of something. We had a retreat one time at my group. We decided to bring in some other people to give, quick to see where religious people are right. And I brought in this nun who was in her 80s. She's passed away now. But to talk to us about prayer. She knew Thomas Merton really well, if any of you have ever read him. She knew him really well, and she lived down in Kentucky around. She was real good friends with him. And so she lived up in Denver, and she was retired nun, and she was wonderful. I mean, I knew her personally for a few years, and so I thought, well, I'll bring her into my 80-person AA group and have her speak about prayer. And someone else brought in a Buddhist monk, and someone else brought in another Buddhist, I think. I can't remember. And so I went to pick her up, to bring her to this kind of a big meeting like this we were there for 3 days, and she came every day to talk about prayer. So we're on our way to the meeting, and she said, well, how many of them are there, that I'm going to be talking to? I said, about 80, and she goes, 80, And then, so I took her home that night, and here's what she said. She said, I'm going to cry, no. She said, I cannot believe it, Denise. She said, when we were driving over there, I thought I was coming into a room with people with really shabby clothes on, and they would be shaking, and they wouldn't have shaved, and the women would be, and she described what she thought she was going to see, and she said, you have all taught me something. She said, I've never seen anything like this. She said, I cannot believe that you came from where you came from, and you're, we clean up. I think we do well when we do the steps, We get jobs. And I even went fly fishing in Chile one time, out in the outback of the Patagonia, fly fishing on these little rivers in the wind. I mean, I kind of have had some adventures, but she was pretty impressed. She was pretty impressed about what we were like, and she was kind of blown away, actually. And I think it kind of changed her life. And she'd been around, she'd been pretty much a nun her whole life. Well, she had been a nun her whole life. And she traveled around the world. She protested Vietnam. She was like a trooper and all this stuff. But she was truly, she said, boy, she said, my faith in God is even stronger. So I think that, we have a gift. I think about this part too, like in this century, well, last century, when it happened, that AA got going, oh my God, can you imagine how many years of history it's been before we had this deal? I mean, I don't think it's hard now to stay sober. It's hard even in AA. I mean, I don't know what the percentages are now, but I think anybody that does this work can stay sober the rest of their life and never have to drink again. I mean, and I took massive amounts of drugs when I had my open heart surgery. I mean, they were shooting me with morphine, and came out of that surgery, I'm cut, down to here, and it was painful. And I mean, you have to sometimes when you're having surgery, you just have to. And I never did have a pill problem, but coming off of that stuff, I was having panic attacks. I was nuts. I mean, I hadn't had anything. I mean, I had an abscess root canal once in my sobriety, but physically, I was like loaded, and I was really sick. And that stuff, I was so glad when that stuff came out of my system, because I was like disconnected, and I started to see, how this stuff really, really has power. And I, got out of that, off of all the drugs and stuff after a couple weeks after I got home, and I was driving to AA meetings, and we in our group, we have people that kind of watch us, like if we're coming out of a surgery, and they keep track of us. My sponsor of 50 years next year, she just was in a car wreck since I've been in Delta, and I've been talking to her every day, and she's had to take pain pills, and she's a little goofy right now. It's like, oh God, and but she tells me every day, okay, I only have 3 left, I have 2 left, I want, and so we keep track of each other, because we give each other permission to do that, because we want to stay sober. And I probably talked enough, so I am really thankful that you guys asked me to speak, and I'm so glad I got to come over and be a part of Sally's new baby and your lives. And if I've said anything that feels good or works or something, then that's all the better. And I prayed my ass off in the bathroom back there before the meeting, like, just use me, I don't know what I'm going to say. I rehearsed all day, and not one thing I think that I rehearsed all day has even come out of my mouth, so thank God. Okay, all right, thank you.